The conversations and information provided are not intended to substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
The opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not reflect the view of Humana Military or the Department of Defense.
Welcome to the Operation Within podcast, where we talk about health and a deeper sense of well-being.
Operation Within is a collective initiative to optimize holistic health matters and nourish within community, within self, and within family.
Thank you for joining the conversation on Operation Within podcast. We are your hosts, Mel
and Marty, and our conversations are real, they're raw, and reflective.
These conversations offer meaningful dialogue on experiences within the military community, oriented to empower and strengthen health and vitality in our communities who serve.
We want to give a special thanks to Humana Military and our partners who have brought Operation Within to life.
Let's dive in. All right, so we are here with Wendy Fish, and I'm so excited to introduce you guys to her and dive into our conversation today. So Wendy has more than 20 years of proven relationship and business experience in for-profit, nonprofit, and military organizations. Her past 13 years of experience focused on improving the lives of military members and their families, including military survivors and caregivers. Wendy currently works for the Department of Defense as the 37th Training Wing True North Program Manager and is a certified integrative nutrition health coach. She previously held positions as the Senior Director for the USO San Antonio, Senior Program Director of TAPS Military, and Veteran Caregiver Network. She is a co-founder and Vice President of the Friends of the Fallen organization and managed the USO's National Support Program for Families of the Fallen. Wendy has developed significant influence within the local San Antonio business and military community as a strong veteran and military family advocate. She is the spouse of Chief Master Sergeant, retired David Fish, and mother of 3 children. Wendy, we are so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I'm excited about the podcast and this opportunity, so thanks for inviting me.
Of course. And I couldn't think of anybody better to dive into a conversation for military spouses around meaning and purpose and exploring your own significance. And, you know, I think that with the lifestyle as a military spouse, you can so often get lost or feel discouraged in finding what your purpose is because your whole life is oriented around your service member, right? Mm-hmm. On their schedule and, you know, where we're PCSing to or what needs of the family needs to be taken care of first. So it happens all the time that we put that before ourselves. And I want to invite you to share kind of a backstory on this conversation around discovering your significance.
Yeah, so for me, I think it took a while for me to do that, a pretty long while. I was a military spouse for about 25 years. And like a lot of military spouses, I had a lot of adversity in my childhood. I had lived through foster care and abuse and neglect. And by the time I was in 10th grade, I dropped out of school. Wow. To go to work full time. So the first, I would say, by the time I was 21 years old, I was already married, divorced, and a single mom. I think at that point in my life, I didn't feel very significant at all,
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear this in mainstream mental health and like healing and all this of like our childhood and where we come from. And so many people in the military get married really young. Mm-hmm. You know, I was 19 when I got married. I wasn't even graduated from high school when I was engaged. I mean, I remember going back and having a ring on my finger, and my teachers and friends at lunch were like, is this okay? Like, are we allowed to do that? Like, this is so strange. So many get married so young, but there's also this whole story before the military, right?
Yeah. My dad was in the military also, and my mom and dad met each other when they were 17 and 18-year-old on a Greyhound bus and got married within 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Of meeting each other on it. Yeah. So I think it's a pretty common story that you hear that.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about how like finding meaning and significance, at especially 21 being married, divorced, and a single parent, moving into, the next phase of your life, or like when was it the realization of like coming into your significance, or was there more things that had to do with like finding yourself?
Yeah. So I met my second husband, and he was military, and so we only knew each other for 8 months before we got married, and then we ran off to Germany, and Dave and I both, worked really hard just to overcome the adversity that we both had, as young people in the world, and so we just worked really hard, and went back to school and got our education. We both ended up graduating from college and having careers that were very successful. But I still didn't really feel very significant at that point in my life.
Do you want to share a little bit on as like throughout your military spouse career? It really is like during that time of your life, having success and creating these things. I mean, your bio is incredible. The things you have done for this community and been part of is just amazing. When we think about significance and meaning in life, reflecting back to if you have any stories you want to share during your time or about that.
Yeah, I think I just really was trying to do everything I could that I thought was the right thing to do. So it was like, go back to school, take care of your kids, try to do things in the community that are going to be supportive and meaningful, So I know like when Dave and I went to, we got stationed at Dover, and Dave was the chief at the Port Mortuary at Dover. And at that time I was kind of doing some soul searching. I had been working at a company that really wasn't a meaningful career, but I was doing good in it, but it just wasn't very meaningful. And so that was really the point that I started really being part of the military culture, so we get to Dover Air Force Base, and the commander's wife comes to meet me with the plant and like, welcome. And she's like, I heard you want to help out. And they had just passed the bill for families of the fallen to start coming to Dover for the dignified transfers. So I said, yeah. And I thought, well, I'll just get cookies or something, I was, nervous about being in that environment, but, and that was really a big change for me to be able to go and do that and, help the families and change my whole career trajectory at that point, really, to start working in nonprofits and start getting to do some of the things that I got to do that was in my bio.
What's beautiful is, and I think I can relate to this as, when I was in college or even before trying to figure out how's my life going to look being married to the military. And so often you see this like, okay, how can we be and work together as a community? Because the military really is like a family, and getting these ways to be able to serve and contribute, alongside your spouse's career. And I do love, I know that, things like FRG, and there's all these ways of trying to get the families involved into or being supported through, through leadership spouses and those types of things. Is there anything that in your experience that you would share with military spouses if they want to get more involved in the military side of things to volunteer or support, where to start?
Yeah, there's some really great programs out there, like the Key Spouse program. There's here in San Antonio, there's you can go to be a volunteer and sign up to volunteer, and they have all those things listed in there through the Military Family Readiness Centers. And then also like USO, of course, they're always looking for volunteers to help out. But I think for me, like really just looking, and I think you did the same thing, Melissa, where you were like there's some things you noticed were missing and that were needed. And that, so sometimes you end up creating things,
right? Yeah.
So like the Friends of the Fallen in Dover, that organization, there was a need. And so we're like, okay, how can we help fill this need? So it doesn't necessarily always have to be something that's already put together, but it could just be trying to help fill the needs of what's going on.
Well, and when you think about like the example of as a spouse, because one thing to remember is that we see things firsthand, right?
Yeah.
Like we kind of have an intimate we understand the inner workings of things, and we're seeing the impact of this culture and this lifestyle and just things that are going on. So it's able, I find that I dance on both sides sometimes because I'm human, is like I get frustrated, right? And I know I've had many conversations with different spouses on being frustrations about different things and how hard it is. And it's difficult because sometimes it feels like there's a disconnect. But on the other side of it is, it's like, okay, if I see this, there's a gap here, there's something missing. How can I contribute to that conversation? How can we amplify, the space that needs to be held in a way that is inclusive or invitational for other spouses as well? Because, I think that a lot of spouses do want to get involved in these different ways. And maybe if you want to share a little bit of the story of how Friends of the Fallen came together.
Yeah, so it basically was a whole lot of like military spouses that came together and said, okay, how can we help? There's all of these families that are coming, and they're coming to a sea of military people, and a lot of people aren't going to be comfortable with that. So it was like, how can we help this mission? So, none of us had any nonprofit experience. We didn't know really what we were doing at all. But we definitely had the support of the command that was like, whatever it is that you guys can do. And so we ended up building a nonprofit together, that's still there operating now, which is really, really awesome to know that that's still there. But yeah, I think, I don't know, once I started becoming more involved in what was going on, instead of thinking about how this was impacting us negatively, then we really started coming together more, and then it ended up taking me in places that I never would have went otherwise. So it can seem like it's difficult, and it is all of those things, but it also can be it can allow for a lot of growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, I think that one thing to remember too within the military is there's, turnover. People are constantly coming and going. It's for something to be created that is stable, it's going to be difficult for it to come from the inside. And this is, as a community, it really does take a village. And to be able to find ways that are meaningful to you as a spouse, right? Especially when something keeps showing up that you're like, this is something that needs to be, or it's clear that there's a desire or a want or a need for this, and then being able to show up and just propose. I know in my experience, like just putting it out there of saying, hey, what if I offered this complimentary, or what if I volunteered for this, or would you guys or this organization be interested in this? And what I have found is that you never know who you're going to meet. You never know the, like, for example, you might have an idea, and then when it actually is manifested, or it's happening, and it's physical, and everybody's experiencing these things, the feedback, it might open a new door in such a different way. So just being able to explore and see if there is a way to support, if you're interested in that, if you're feeling disconnected, especially from the military community. What a beautiful example from Wendy, of just like, all right, well, what do we need? And then how do we connect as a community, for sure.
And there's a lot of power in that. I think the military spouses coming together, even with you and the things that we've got to do together, I think there's a lot of power in that.
Well, and I found over the years that it gives, when spouses see that, it gives other spouses, it's almost like this permission to turn on. And the reason I say that is because, I've experienced the struggles, and you probably have too, of like self-identity as a military spouse. People have directly said to me, like, you're just a spouse, or, like, just like, I love this topic of significance, because as a dependent, I mean, we're called dependents, and there's a whole energy around just being called a dependent. Oh, I'm a dependent. I'm just a number. I'm the hidden family member, or, especially if there's an issue or it's brought forth, it's kind of like, well, your spouse got to figure it out. Like, sorry, not sorry. Like there's this disconnect that happens, and the courage and the internal work to be able to explore, how can I show up in this and like be part of this? It's been a challenge. It's not been, I mean, I've been in military or involved in, technically we got married in 2013. So but I mean, I was with him when he went to basic and like all the things. And so it's been about 11 years. And I feel like it wasn't till the last couple years that I really feel more grounded in who I am as a partner in this military family, like as a partner.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's funny because, so speaking about that, so I know events we would go to, I would always have the name tag that said spouse of David Fish, you know, and it was really great. A couple of years ago, we went to an event, and it was when I was the director at USO, and they hand my husband a name tag and it says spouse of Wendy Fish.
That is amazing. It's such an interesting, and I'm just curious, like, what did he say? Was he just like, oh, like,
he was like, what is happening right now? And I'm like, see how that feels? Really?
Yeah.
Like you don't have any kind of identity whatsoever, you know?
Just like, I belong to that person.
Exactly. I'm like, I'm going to frame this because this is hysterical.
Yeah.
And that ended up happening quite a few times. Is like, okay, I guess I can be your spouse. You've been my spouse all these years.
That's beautiful. And it's amazing too, is like having these open dialogues, I think, with your partner, because I found that, you know, I'm pretty open with, obviously I'm open with my husband, but you know, we have these conversations and it helps so much because though I know that there's situations where like, you know, I don't get a say and it's not, you know, he's got to do what he's got to do, but being able to have conversations on how I'm feeling, or if I feel like this is like choices or things are happening that it's like I don't get a say and I'm struggling with, how can we collaborate? Because for so many years, I felt like as a military spouse, I have to compromise. And then we started really having more conversations and realizing that, you know, our life with the military can be collaborative. Like I can collaborate with my husband. I don't have to compromise, but it's about our communication and being able to be vulnerable about, you know, and we went to an event a couple years ago. And there was an organization I was so excited to collaborate with or hoping to work with or volunteer with. And they, you know, this specific organization had said, when I'd waited to talk to the person. And then when finally I was able to talk to this person, they said, well, I'm not just a military spouse. And it was, and of course I was like, it actually like took my breath away because I felt like, okay, this person is not interested in talking to me. And like, I felt so little, and my husband was standing next to me. And I think that was one of the first times for him to see an example of that, because I've talked about it. And I feel that like, again, I really try to include him in a lot of the things that I do or want to pursue, just like he tries to include me. But it was a moment that it was like, what, that does happen? Like, yeah.
Yeah. We always, I guess I've always been in similar careers, my husband and myself. I might have been on the civilian side and him on the military side, but we've always kind of been in the same kind of things. And we've always collaborated a lot internally between us, which I think has really helped, you know, both of our careers. But yeah, I think it can be really difficult, right?
Yeah, because, and you know, for early on, it was really our PCS to San Antonio early on that I realized it's like, we're not having conversations. Like I'm literally drowning and feeling like I'm dying because I'm so depressed and I'm so sad that I had to leave, because Fort Bragg, I had an amazing time at Fort Bragg. I love Fayetteville, you know, and it took a long time, but I felt so unseen. And the part of that was because I wasn't communicating. It was, you know, this realization that I need to start asking for what I want.
Yeah.
Right.
That really didn't happen for me for a long time also. I would tell him things as far as career wise, but not what my needs were, you know? So And I think I did a lot of bending and compromising. And it really took a diagnosis of cancer before I really started focusing inward and going, okay, what
Wow.
needs do I actually have?
Wow, thank you for sharing. Would you be open to sharing a little bit more about, because it makes me also think of what you shared before of how it's like you still didn't feel, after a successful career and all this stuff, you still didn't feel significant.
Mm-hmm.
And then this diagnosis, kind of what came from that?
Well, it really was just a wake-up call to say, okay, what are the things that I need? Because I was doing a lot of things for a lot of people, taking care of my husband, taking care of my kids, taking care of all these people at work. But I really wasn't doing a good job of taking care of myself. And I knew the importance of taking care of them, but I didn't really feel the importance of taking care of myself. So it was kind of like just this giving all the time, and not filling my cup back up. So I think by the time I got diagnosed with cancer, I was pretty empty.
Wow. This thing of giving, and I think you see this so much in especially women, right? Like there's two pieces of this, is where our value and our worth so often it's like comes from what we do, right? It's like, and especially as a military spouse with these stigmas and these struggles of, you want, I know, and I think it's a type of person, like not everybody has these feelings, but it's like, I want to do something in my life too, and trying to balance that with my husband's career. But there's this doing, and how so much I source value and worth from what I do versus just who I am.
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, it's hard, especially when you have little kids that you're taking care of. There's only so many hours in the day. By the time you've been working and then you're taking care of the kids, and maybe you're trying to get a workout in here and there, or, that there's just not a whole lot of time to think about what it is that you need and to even spend time for yourself, so, but having cancer, it kind of pushed me into, okay, there's no other choice. Now you have to start doing something for yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be here to help anybody else, So, so that's really when I started saying, you know what, it's time for me to start saying no. I got to start telling no to other people. That way I could really start saying yes to myself and start figuring out what it is that I liked and what it is that I needed. Because at that point, I didn't even know. I had no idea what I liked anymore. I'd just been giving and giving for like forever, So it was really an opportunity for me to step back and say, okay, what do you like? And I really just started with just following things that I thought were interesting to me, so.
That's a beautiful way to, because I think that with a lot of people, it's like, well, whether we're at rock bottom or like a wake up call, like a health diagnosis, right? That these things of, it's like, well, what now? Mm-hmm. And I love what you just said, that it's just like, what are things that are interesting to me? Like, what's interesting to me? Yeah.
And so when I was little, I used to love to read books, and for the longest time, I didn't read anything. I didn't have time for that, So, and so I would just start reading, and I totally geek out on stuff, So like I can totally get into some research, It's like I'm not reading, it's just I really found I had a huge passion for health and wellness, in all kinds of different ways. I always had a passion for physical wellness, and so so that was something I always followed. But I just started, picking up books that I was interested in. Next thing you know, I have like a whole library of health and wellness stuff. And I'm like, I guess I'm kind of passionate about this,
That's a beautiful, like, go look at what books you own.
Yeah.
See what you're interested in.
Exactly.
You can tell what you're interested in by the books.
And what things have you subscribed to? It's like, oh, okay. It's like, I actually really am into health and wellness,
Well, and was this while you were receiving treatment for cancer, like when this kind of was going on, where you're like, okay, I'm going to read, I need to find things that light me up?
Yeah. Well, and at first it actually started with, I got to figure out how to get myself healthy. It's like I had cancer, went through chemotherapy and multiple surgeries. It's like, so first it started with, I got to figure out how to get myself healthy. But then it turned into this like just insatiable, like, I'm just devouring everything I can about health and wellness, and not just physical wellness, but emotional wellness and spiritual wellness, and just really started figuring those things out and started doing things I love, like taking yoga teacher training. I did that with you way back when. And, I didn't do that so that I could be a yoga teacher. I just wanted to learn more about yoga, and then I decided to take courses on health coaching courses, because I'm like, well, I'm really interested in this. Is there any gaps that I'm missing? So I didn't start it so that I could become a health coach. I just was really interested in it. And I thought, well, I can use this to help myself and my family. And then I ultimately ended up starting a business, but I didn't start that to start the business. I was just interested in it. And then it was like, you know what? There's a lot of information I have here that I could help other people with too. So.
Well, and what's beautiful is that what we offer ourselves and the curriculum that we learn in our life is really the catalyst in how we serve. And so I find too is like if we show up to learn something so we can teach it and like let me memorize this so I can regurgitate it and do it this way and just it's doing, that really grounded fluidity and authenticity can oftentimes get lost because if we don't apply it to ourselves and really digest our experiences and what works for us, what doesn't, so often we continue to perform. Mm-hmm. We continue to just duplicate whatever we think is supposed to be duplicated.
Right. Absolutely.
You said something that I love when we were talking the other day is you said that it was time for you to start working on your own problems instead of everyone else's. Mm-hmm. And I love this because it goes back to, kind of what I was just saying. It's like we oftentimes project so much on like, okay, got to fix this, got to fix them. Mm-hmm. And if we oftentimes forget that we see the world through our own filter, right? And our filter is so much informed by our own subconscious patterns or, childhood experiences to our own beliefs and systems and constructs. Like it gets really interesting when you kind of go into what informs the way you see the world. Mm-hmm. And this, I think that so many, part of it's a survival figure out. I used to tell my husband, I'm like, I am so over being a chronic problem solver. Mm-hmm. Like I'm a chronic problem solver. Mm-hmm. And because navigating, we did a geographical separation because of the military, because I had my businesses here in San Antonio and he had to go to Florida, and literally 2 years living between Florida and San. I look back and I'm just like, what was I doing? But also trusting things fall organized in the way they're supposed to. But it kind of goes back to, it was like you problem solve everybody else's issues. But, unfortunately, sometimes it's, a health a diagnosis of cancer or, trauma or a big or loss or a realization that, ends up being a wake up call.
It really does. Especially when you look around when something like that happens and you go, you know what? Everyone is going to go on without you if you're not here. Mm-hmm. So if that's possible, then that's possible that I can actually take some time for myself now, because life will go on. And it was really interesting too, because when I started saying no and started saying, you know what, I can't do that right now. I can't do this right now. They figured it out, so it was like, oh, they don't have to have me figure everything out for them. They can actually figure it out for themselves, so.
That's so interesting too, because I feel there's two things with this. One is that when we do it for everybody else, we're robbing them of their own curriculum. Yes. We're robbing them of their agency. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that when we start to say no and start to set boundaries, because you show people who you are, like, and people believe you. So if I'm a yes man and I say yes to everything, well, people know Melissa's reliable. And let me call Melissa. Let's ask Melissa. Let's get, that's because I've shown people that. So I can't get mad at everybody. Like, that's me who chose to say yes or who chose to say no. Mm-hmm. So boundaries are so important because, it's your boundaries that are informing others about where you stand and who you are.
And it was just an amazing feeling to be able to take the weight of the world off my shoulders and set it down and go, you know what? That's not mine. It's not mine.
Yeah. I think that like the fear though of saying no, right? Because I'm sure maybe there's some listening and I've been in this. It's like, you don't want to say no because you don't want to mess up the relationship, right? Or you don't want to disappoint people. I have found, though, is that saying no oftentimes preserves relationships, because me saying no is because I need to make sure I take care of myself so I can show up authentically and in my fullness with you. Because if you can't accept my no, then is there really room for me in this relationship?
Right.
So it's a kind of an organic filter into like the right people in your life and the not right people, huh?
Exactly. Because the people that, care about you and love you, they're going to want you to have your life the way you need it. And if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. If ever I asked you to do something and you said you couldn't, I'd know it was because you couldn't, or maybe that's not the thing you want to do.
Yeah. It's, this really is like the saying yes over and over and over to all these different things, or even with our own kids, it's like to do it all, and the pressure to be this specific type of parent, potentially because maybe we didn't have that, or, it's, there's a pressure, especially in the military, because if you're single parent or not, some people are single parenting, but it feels like you're a single parent sometimes, right? It's like this aspect of control, and because controlling helps us feel safe.
Well, and I think for me, I really had this feeling of, I didn't feel loved. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone that I came in contact with knew that they were loved and cared for, So, and in doing that, feeling needed made me feel loved, but it really wasn't. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it's so beautiful that you said that. So I want to repeat what you said. It's that I didn't feel love, which is an aspect of also not feeling validated or good enough. So I wanted to make sure everybody who encounters me and who I'm with feels loved, valued, and worthy. And in that made me feel loved, valued, and worthy. And if we look at this is, and it's a beautiful example of a lot of codependency I've had to heal in my own life, of like being codependent on people liking you back.
Yeah.
Right. It's how we tend to outsource this kind of love when, this is, it's just, I think that highlighting and being aware of these tendencies. And maybe Wendy, if you want to share, if there's something that really was the aha moment in that, of like, wow, like this is where this yes is coming from, this overcompensation of giving and loving and being loved is coming from. Was there an aha moment or something that happened?
There was just a lot of work. I did a lot of work in trying to figure that out, because it's like after a while, I just really started feeling taken advantage of, taken for granted. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like, this isn't working for me anymore. So what once was working as, okay, now I feel like I'm loved because I'm needed, all of a sudden was like, I don't feel that way anymore. Now I'm feeling like I'm just being taken advantage of, taken for granted, because I'm giving, but I'm not getting back in return. So I think it started wearing on me for a while. And then, having cancer and looking around to see who actually was there whenever I wasn't doing and giving and all of that, when I was like, you know what, I need to take a break and have some time for myself, I saw who came around, who the people that were there that supported me, so which was a very interesting dynamic in itself, because I had been so used to giving, I wasn't used to receiving, so that's another thing. It was like, okay, so now I'm sick and I need help, but I don't want to ask for it, because I feel like I don't want to be a burden on anybody. Exactly. So I'm like, so people would, hey, can I bring you a meal? Or, hey, do you need anything? No, I'm good. And I actually had a friend of mine come to me and say, Wendy, we want to help. We want to do something. And every time you say no to us, you're taking that opportunity away from us to show you love and show that we care for you. And so I was like, okay, I got it. So then I started saying yes, like, okay, yes, bring me a meal over. Okay, you want to, make me a bracelet and bring it over. You want to bring me a plant, bring it over. And I just started saying yes. So that was a really interesting thing that happened, and a shift in me where it was like, okay, I'm good enough, I am worthy, and I can receive as well as give, so that was kind of just an interesting journey for me.
Yeah, it's this like, so finding our significance through what we do and how we're giving, and in a even deeper essence, it's how we're controlling our life, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the military, our life can feel super out of control. So it's like the way I choose to show up and what I do and how I give, there's a piece of control in that, right? To flipping it where it's like you're starting to receive, and it's almost this, it's really letting that grip go of, okay, this is what I need, but allowing people to show up for you.
And this light bulb going off, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm my problem.
It's, you know, for those listening, I want to point out part of the power, like this is recognizing how much, you know, self-agency and power you have within yourself. And, you know, when we think about it, it's like, you know, we can get frustrated with others. Oh, they're taking advantage of me. And, you know, we can go into these narratives that are so disempowering when we start to realize and start to self-reflect of, wait, I have shown up in this way, so they only know me in this way. And taking that self-accountability so you can change things in your life. And even if it just starts with like being present with, okay, so today, this is what I have today. And these are the interactions I'm having today. And just being a little bit more conscious to what you agree to, or, you know, do you make it, you know, is there a way to make it, this is just something, this is a Mel thing, make it yummy. Do you make it cozy? Do you find ways to bring the yummy and the cozy and the sweetness into your day-to-day life? Or is it just, I gotta do, and feeling just empty? Yeah. So a lot of, you know, it's uncomfortable talking about self-accountability, but it's important because the light is always within you. So I want to ask Wendy, you know, when you talk about, you know, the whole, or like when you were looking for more of like, okay, well, what am I interested in? And, you know, that piece when you're reading your books and kind of diving into even the example of from teacher training, like yoga teacher training, to the health coaching stuff, doing it really for you. You know, during that time, is there anything that you'd want to share or empower military spouses, or, you know, again, this is for veterans and just the community, everybody. You know, is there anything else regarding the importance of self-study or, you know, finding what brings you joy?
Yeah, I think everybody deserves that. You know, we all deserve to have those things in our life. And so I hear a lot of times people say that, like, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I want, you know, and I think just taking the time to explore that and figure out what it is and just do something, you know? So it's like, oh, I really like to dance, or I like to dance when I was a kid. Go take a dance lesson, you know, or go, you know, dance in your bedroom or whatever, you know, but just do things that light you up, you know, try to find things that make you happy and make you fulfilled. And, yeah, it doesn't always have to be about the doing.
It's interesting because when you like explore what are things that interest you and learning about it too, because you may think, you know, like with nutrition, for example, it's like, you might think you know how to, like, oh, I cook well. Like, I'm a good cook. I have my things. But then if you take a course or you show up for a workshop, like, your mind may be blown by what you learn.
Yeah, there's definitely levels.
Yeah, I mean, you know, even with yoga, like when I go, you know, as a yoga trainer and a yoga therapist, you know, yoga practice is great, but then there's so many layers, and I am, you know, here 10 years plus, and I'm still learning new things, just mind blown about, you know, mind body medicine and these things. So, you know, learning is a never ending journey.
Well, and I love learning, you know, so like I said, I can totally geek out and get nerdy.
Yes. Beautiful. You know, and the thing is, when you are practicing something or engaging in something that is bringing joy to your life, what you're doing is you're taking your focus off of what I don't have, what I'm not good at, you know, what I can't do, and you're shifting it into what is right with you. And I think too, is when we talk about finding your significance, especially and again, you know, we're talking about military families and community and for military spouses, but I also feel this resonates for a lot of women out there of like, well, what's my significance? And men too. what is my significance, going into start with what's right, like, and start to witness how often we get attached to these negative feedback loops that validate our own disempowerment. And then how do we build wholeness within ourselves? So, starting with what's right with us and then amplifying that vitality for wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so a few more things before we get ready to close. I want to dive into the conversation of, we've touched on doing versus being. And, you talk about being for so long, you were on this hamster wheel of life and, shifting into living a more authentic life. Mm-hmm. Would you share a little bit about your journey with that?
Yeah, I think for a long time, what I was feeling on the inside really wasn't what everybody would see on the outside. I had this really interesting experience where I went and did some art therapy one time, and the project was you were supposed to outline your hand, and then on one side of the hand on the outside you would show what you felt like everybody else saw about you, so I draw this like beautifully manicured hands, fingernails painted, my sparkling wedding ring, my skin smooth, and everything's all beautiful. And then I turn it over, and on the other side, it's this like very weathered, calloused, bruised hand, and so this was like a big aha moment for me, right? Where it's like, okay, this is not congruent. What I'm feeling on the inside is not, what's on the outside. So throughout this whole process of learning about myself and just getting involved in things that I like and therapy and spending time with friends and, all of these things. And then, speaking my truth, just sharing how I feel about things. I've really started to be able to match that, to where what's on the inside is also reflecting on the outside, and sometimes it's going to be rough on the outside because I'm feeling rough on the inside. That's okay. And then sometimes it's going to be beautiful on the inside, just like is on the outside,
Well, and that's the beauty is that, we don't have to, somebody once told me this, and this was so liberating. She said, I was like, I have to make a decision. And like, who am I? And what's my purpose? And like, I need to know. Mm-hmm. And she said, you never have to actually decide anything. Nothing is ever official. Like there's no, and we are told that, but it's not true. She said, you get to choose in this moment.
Yeah.
And when coming to authenticity, when you're talking about sometimes it's beautiful and sometimes it's difficult, it's allowing us to hold that space for ourselves to show up in our fullness, which includes, the magic and the beauty and the, empowerment, but also the human.
Yeah. Well, like this, for instance, a few years back, I would have never been comfortable with sharing all of the things from my past. And I think one of the things as a military spouse is every time we move, we can kind of create whatever reality we want in that moment. Right.
Yeah.
So I can kind of push away and forget all of those things that happened before. So I'm just moving forward. And now I'm at a point where, okay, yes, it's vulnerable and uncomfortable sometimes, but it's okay, because I realize I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to pretend to be what I'm not. I can fully show who I am, so yeah, it's been interesting.
That is such an interesting concept regarding PCSing and how when we move, it is like a total identity reset.
Right.
Like you really get to show up and be whoever you want to be and in whatever way. Mm-hmm. And it can create a pattern of kind of running from, and, one of the things to remember is that when we start to integrate ourselves and it's like we can hold, who we are and our goals and, the things we love about ourselves and then have compassion.
Yeah.
I think compassion is really the antidote or the medicine for, integrating our past or our experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had the experience of, I was able to, there's an organization called Curtain Up Cancer Foundation. And I had this really neat experience of being able to write my cancer journey and share that story. And there was like actual professional actress and singers and dancers who did my story on a stage. So I remember sitting in the audience, and this was one of my aha moments, where I'm sitting in the audience and I'm going, here I am feeling, myself like, gosh, I'm like this damaged, I've had all this baggage and stuff, and then I remember watching this watching it on the stage being played out in front of me, and I'm looking up and I'm like, wow, this woman is so strong and resilient and amazing, and then having that aha moment of, holy shit, that's me. Like that's me. Like I am strong and I am resilient, and I am an amazing woman,
You are.
so.
Yes. What an amazing gift that is.
It really was.
It's like if we were to write our own stories, like just to reflect back in your life and write your story and then hear somebody else. I used to do this in coaching where I would ask the client and I would say, tell me a little bit about, like, this would be my I used to do grounding your vision sessions with people. So I would start with, tell me a little bit about yourself and what has brought you to wanting to be here today. And so they would tell me their story. And what I would do is, as they told me, I would type it out. Like everything they said, I would type it out. When they finished, I would reread what they shared with me back. And I was like, was there anything that showed up for you in listening to that? And I worked with so many people with this technique. And always it was like, first it was the shock of, I've never heard someone tell me my story back, because part of the question is tell me about yourself. I want to know your life, like summarize your journey, like what's brought you to being here. And just that reflection to hear that part of you, because again, going back to our filters, we only see ourselves through the filter we have, but to be able to sit down and hear it, materialize it, it's a completely different, almost like you don't recognize yourself. You're
really.
like,
It was an amazing experience. It really was. And for all the people that I've seen do it, the same kind of experience, it's like, wow.
yeah. Oh, that is so beautiful. Well, so one of the things before we close today, we're going to give you guys an invitation. So here's some self-inquiry things around supporting you for developing your significance and connecting deeper to that. And I want to just start off by saying that your significance is not necessarily something that you do or extend out of yourself. It's really folding back within and connecting with the heart within. I don't know, Wendy, if you want to add to any of that.
No, I would just say, I hope people don't wait for a wake-up call like cancer to be able to start doing these things. Because feeling stuck in what they're doing or some kind of other major issue hitting rock bottom, start now. Like, don't wait.
Yeah. And it's almost hard to believe how accessible, just the self-reflection stuff is. And so some examples, Wendy and I have talked about, she talks about, do you know what makes you come alive? What makes you feel healthy and whole? What are things that it's like when you're doing that, even if it's like building Legos, I don't know, right? It's like, if we judge ourselves in this process of saying, oh, this is what lights me up, it's funny because the things that light me up, it's poetry and yoga and then, science. And it's like, how do these things all fit together? Over time, I found ways that they all fit together actually beyond, but especially, 8, 9, 10 years ago, the poetry stuff that was hidden, that was in my closet, it was in the journals, and I didn't share that. And I never felt like there was, even though that was a dream, is to be a writer in my life, I was like, that's not relevant. I can't create really from that. But over time, it was being able to hold all these things that light me up, that there's ways to do it.
Well, it's really interesting when you do that, because the same situation's happening with me now, as I just got a new opportunity, and I'm able to pull my passion for wellness and also military advocacy, and be able to pull those things together to be able to do the work that I'm doing now. So you just never know how that's going to, and this job that I'm in now didn't even exist a few years ago. So you just never know how things are going to are going to end up.
Which I think is the magic of just being present, like be where you're at, because, and the reflection, as we do these reflections, it's like, well, so we look at what brings you joy, but what are the things that are weighing you down, things that do not light you up, things that feel like a chore, and, explore how you can let those things go or create a little more space, because, I always see this metaphor of, it's like, you got to let go of certain things for new things to come in.
Absolutely. I read something the other day that talked about, like, if you're constantly working on like scrubbing the mud off, it's going to be hard for you to really light up, so you're spending too much energy on that.
That's so true. Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. And another self-reflection, question to think about is, how, when you ask yourself, what are things that light you up, what is the next feeling that follows it? Is it fear? Is it doubt? Is it judgment? Is it, oh, well, I can never do anything with that? Like, just hold it, right? We don't have to get lost or tangled in the narrative, but can you just start to notice? Because these are your patterns. And part of self-reflection and self-accountability is be able to witness and explore, well, what are my patterns that I've created? And sitting in that discomfort, because oftentimes it's those patterns that are responsible for, our projections, or, when we shut people off, or we don't know how to say no. Like, it's all connected.
Can't receive.
Yeah, or cannot receive. Yeah, so explore into those self-reflection practices. And there are many, many, many different tools out there for self-reflection, and, or even getting involved in different support groups, or working with a mental health professional or a coach.
Yeah, I would say just get out there and get involved, get connected, reach out. Don't sit back and just wait for it to happen. Like, you have to make it happen.
It's true. Yeah.
A lot of times when I see people feeling really disconnected, it's because they're sitting back waiting for connection instead of going out there and making connection.
Is there any suggestions? I know you had said earlier, it's like, we'll find out, what, you could, the USO or these other organizations that really hold a lot of space, even within Operation Within, it's a big mission of ours is to cultivate this community through our upcoming events, through conversations with the podcast, and our mindfulness book, which will be coming out soon, that has a lot of self-reflection practices in it. But Wendy, are there any other resources or suggestions of where people can get started to help cultivate more meaningful dialogue around this, or just be able to serve?
Yeah, I think just find things that you're interested in, and there is an endless amount of need out there. There's things that you can get involved in, but do things that you enjoy. So, and that will take you in places that you may never have dreamed of.
Yeah, I have found that even if, because obviously Google is great, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's hard, or Facebook groups can feel so clogged with posts, and it's hard to find exactly what you're looking for. But even contacting, if there is whether it's the USO or other organizations, and just saying, hey, I'm looking for, a group of people interested in farming, and, or, gardening, right? And then maybe they might know someone. So again, going back to, you never know who knows.
And sometimes there's not going to be something. And so maybe you might have to create it.
Yes. Yes. Lean in. It's amazing. You never know what opens you will open you to.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for being here. I don't know if there's anything else before we close the podcast today.
No, I again, thank you so much for this opportunity. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find. I think I was like the first Wendy Fish.
Wendy Fish. And you provide coaching services too, right?
Yes, I still do. I have a full-time job, but I also do a part-time coaching job with Integrative nutrition coaching. So
awesome. And do they just contact you through Facebook,
Yep.
Wendy Fish?
They can just contact me through Facebook. I can also give my email address.
That's totally up to you,
Yeah.
or they can message.
Okay. Yeah. They could just message me on Facebook.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you all for tuning in today to have this meaningful and relevant conversation around finding your significance. I'm your host, Mel, and we are looking forward to our next podcast episode.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.